think it is.
When you go from a Windows machine to turn Mac, oh, that's what what.
I'll let you have a seat, sir. Dave, you're all set to go. Can I start the meeting? I mean, is everything set up for you for the meeting?
Pardon me?
Is everything set to go? Are you okay to start?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, fine. No, didn't mean to slow things down. No. Just hobbling along here.
Okay, I'm going to call a meeting of our regularly scheduled meeting of, what can you talk tonight? For the Montara Water and Sewer District. Did I get that correctly?
Yeah, no, you
Uh-oh, what did I do wrong?
didn't say it correctly.
Help me out, sir.
Montara Water and Sanitary
Oh,
District.
that's right. I don't know why I get so upset.
Wait, you're up for you.
I'm getting to that age. Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Okay. Director Slater Carter,
Present.
Director Boyd,
Here.
Director Wilson,
Here?
Director Harvey,
Here.
Director Hubert.
Here.
Okay, I have one request tonight. We have a very extensive agenda, both closed and open. And I'd like to give plenty of time for the comments that are necessary so everyone can be aware of their comments and we'll consolidate them down as much as you can. Because I would like not us to be going into the wee hours, which our agenda could potentially get us to. So please be aware of that. And with that, do we have any oral comments on items that are not on the agenda? Comments?
I would want everybody to be aware that we now have an AED, an automatic external defibrillator, located out here in the hallway. You can't miss it if you look around. It's bright orange.
Right.
Thank you.
Probably got that because of the age of several of the.
There has been discussion of the sewer rates on next door, and on the website app next door, and I pulled out some of them, and so if I read them to Clemens, would you mind, we can answer them quickly, but it shows that there are folks who perhaps we need to do a better job trying to communicate. So the first question was asking why there are differential rates for sewer service between residences and businesses, for instance.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Catherine.
Can I ask, why don't you get all the questions out and then you can just answer?
Sure.
Oh.
The second is, will this rate increase lead to capacity increases? The third is, why are MWSD sewer rates higher than other districts or cities? And the fourth was a comment about, that referred to sewer bills as property tax bills, even though, because they're on the same notice from the county.
Okay, so first of all, there's no capacity increases related to the rate increases whatsoever. We're actually going to talk about a big part of the rate increases in our next item, so just bear with us here. So no capacity increases. The reason for our sewer rates higher than other coastside areas, I want to be clear that a lot of agencies, even on the peninsula, have higher rates than we do, even after our rate increase, is due to the geographic situation. We're located not in a bowl-shaped area as Granada, where the sewer can gravity drain towards the ocean, and we're not located in Half Moon Bay, where the situation is very similar. We have a backside that requires a lot of pumping. So just as comparison, our ratio miles to pump station we just looked at that for San Francisco. I think ours is the factor of 200 times higher. So we have 13 major pump stations and close to 30 minor pump stations. The city of Half Moon Bay has, how many?
Two.
One, two, three, two?
Two.
Two, and Granada has, small number, two, I think. One, okay. So the pump stations are costly to maintain. Was there something that I didn't address so far?
The sewer tax.
Oh, yeah,
The sewer bills on the tax bill.
So the sewer bills are collected on the tax bill. Those are ad valorem taxes that are separate. The district could also simply bill on a monthly basis like other agencies do. We simply ask for this to be collected on the tax roll. It makes it a lot easier on us, and it makes it a lot easier on the customers.
And then the last one was, why do businesses have a different rate than homeowners?
Yeah, so we're a public agency. We simply can't choose our rates. We have to base them on facts, and we actually produce a sewer rate study. We recently produced a sewer rate study. Now, the different classes are based on strength factors. That means that certain categories, like for example restaurants, produce a higher strength sewer that needs to be treated versus, let's say, offices that don't produce a lot of waste really, that just it's more clear water that's running through there. That means that, for example, the restaurant class is much higher than the residential class, and certain classes, like for example, offices, are slightly cheaper. So I hope that answers the questions.
Catherine, does that suffice for now?
That suffices for now. There were a number of questions about water rates, and I will pull those out and we can address them at our next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
What I might recommend is if Catherine, if you're willing to get the questions over to Clemens, perhaps you could respond on next door and we can address it that way.
Right. I think it's easier if I just ask people to watch our meetings.
That's fine.
Because
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm not really for
Okay.
participating in uncontrolled
No, I agree
forums.
with you. I'll withdraw that suggestion.
Thank you.
social media is very
It
dangerous.
is very, no matter what you're saying, it can be taken out of context. Okay, fair enough. Thank you so much. I don't think we have any public hearings this afternoon or this evening, so we'll go to the consent agenda. And we have 10 items. One is to approve the minutes for April 5, 2018. Two is to approve the financial statements for March of 2018. Three is to approve the warrants for May 1, 2018. Four is the SAM flow report for March 2018. Five is the monthly review of the current investment portfolio. Six, the connection permit application received. Seven, the monthly water production report for March 2018. Eight, the rain report. Nine, the solar energy report. And 10, the monthly public agency retirement service report for February 2018. Any of you wish to withdraw any of these items for the consent agenda?
Move to approve the items.
Thank you. And a
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Jim, assuming.
Aye.
Okay, so.
We nodded.
He nodded. Okay, so that passes 5-0. We have no old business. Now, I have review and possible action of the Sewer Authority Midcoast Draft 20-year cap. Is everyone here to present tonight on that?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't see the manager of it here, so. Okay, so let's go ahead and review and possible action of the Sewer Authority Midcoast Draft 20-year capital improvement plan, and who will be presenting, Clemens?
Keishan, let me just introduce this real briefly. Like I said, this is one of the reasons, or this is the main reason for having to go through a Prop 218 process and raising the rates now roughly 23% next fiscal year and 20% following year. Again, we're basing this on a rate study that is partially based on, or is mainly based on the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side's financial needs. So it's really the centralized treatment plan, SAM, Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side, that drives this rate increase. We have capital needs as well. We planned for them well and anticipated those in the long run. So this, the SAM board received this draft 20-year plan at the April 9 board meeting. SAM really looks at $2 million per year over the coming 20 years, more or less. We'll see this in graphs, I'm certain. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to ask Kishan to maybe just sit in my chair and you folks to get out of the way of this before we turn the beamer on. And hand this over to Kishan, who can also address any questions. We also have Tim Monahan with SRT, who was also very involved in developing this 20-year capital plan for the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side. Okay. All right.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kishan Prativadi. I am the Engineering and Construction Contracts Manager for Sewer Authority Mid-Coast site. And before we go on to our topic for today, which is the 20-year Capital Improvement Program, I'm going to walk you through the 5-year Capital Improvement Program, which was adopted by the SAM board last year, and pretty much walk you through the methodology which was adopted in bringing up the 5-year CIP, because the same methodology was also adopted for the 20-year CIP. So the 20-year Capital Improvement Program was actually contracted to SRT consultants. So I would go through the methodology for the 5-year CIP, and then Tim Monahan from SRT is going to take over and address specifically on the 20-year CIP. And of course, both of us are here for any questions. So the objectives of the Capital Improvement Program was primarily to respond to regulatory and safety concerns, maintain and replace existing assets, protect public health and environment, and finally to embrace a policy of sustainability for the responsible use of the existing resources. I don't know if you guys are already aware, SAM is a Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side, has a wastewater treatment plant which is pretty old, which was upgraded in the 90s, and after that we've been doing it in parts. So this really encompasses all SAM's assets, which would mean the treatment plant, force mains, and the 3 pump stations which SAM owns. That's the Montara pump station, the Portola pump station, and Princeton pump station.
What about Valimar?
Valimar doesn't belong to SAM, it belongs to Montara.
Okay.
So the key drivers for the CIP was regulatory and safety, replacement and rehabilitation, and sustainability, which is energy savings and optimization. So under the head of regulatory and safety, projects were chosen to ensure that the district remains in full regulatory and safety compliance, basically improving the existing facilities for safety reasons, reducing the emission of pollutants to the environment, and finally to meet future regulatory requirements. In the second driver, which was the replacement and rehabilitation, projects were chosen which were related to aging infrastructure and replacement requirements of the district. Provided for ongoing or future renovation activities of the existing assets and to initiate any preventive maintenance. And finally, it also addressed sustainability, energy savings or optimization projects where processes were optimized for energy use, improving the energy efficiency, and to maintain, improve sustainability of the plant, and of course, to lower the maintenance costs. So the modality adopted was primarily the risk management, which is finding out risk factors by determining the probability and the impact. So probability times impact would give you the risk rating. Now for that, the probability of failure was chosen where if the rate of occurrence was once in 10 years, then the score given was 0.5 and so on and so forth, where if it was less than once per year, then the rating chosen was 10. So we had listed out all the assets of SAM and then went through each and every asset, determined the probability and the consequence of failure. And for each one of them, we had given a rating. And then finally, the one which had the highest rating was, of course, the highest risk factor. And that's how we arrived at several priorities for the projects. Now, when we go into the consequence of failure, 3 criteria were considered. First was how much of it has an impact on the existing effluent quality. How much of it has an impact on the treatment capacity and the ability to return the equipment to service, including the staff. Therefore, the consequence of failure also had certain ratings, as you see below. Criteria rating was negligible was 1 and the severe rating was 10. And for each of these criteria, we had given about 33% for effluent quality, 33% for treatment capacity, and 34% for ability to return to service. I'll show you an example of how it was worked out in the next few slides. So therefore, the risk score was calculated primarily by determining the probability of failure rating and the consequence rating. So it's basically P times consequence rating, or P times I, as we normally say in management language. It's probability times consequence rating. So this is an example of how the risk score was determined, where I've already mentioned that risk score is probability times consequence rating. So if you take, for example, belt filter press, the probability of failure rating was 10, which is pretty severe. And the consequence of failure is, we determined that the quality rating was 5 for quality, capacity is 10, serviceability is 10. Therefore, the consequence of failure rating is 8.4, which is basically 5 times 0.33 plus 10 times 0.33, so on and so forth. That will be if you sum it up, then it gives 8.4. The risk score is going to be 8.4 times 10. So that gets us to 84. So in this manner, each one of these assets were assessed a risk score, and that is already in the packet which has been provided to all of you. And then a 5-year capital improvement plan was prepared, which was taken to the board last year, which was approximately $22 million in projects. And it was determined at that point of time that it will be updated each year. We looked for funding for various sources and how we could bring about a reduction in the risk. And then it was determined that maybe we should go for a 20-year capital improvement plan, so that brings us the entire view moving forward, and then we could review the 20-year CIP every year. So that's when Sam decided that we should contract it out to SRT Consultants, and I'll hand it over to Tim Monahan from SRT to take you further on the 20-year CIP. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. As Kishan just explained, the first step in this process of developing SAM's CIP was developing the 5-year program. That was advanced and expanded upon for a 20-year CIP, looking at all assets that SAM owns from the ocean outfall treatment plant, IPS, and pump stations. Now, in talking with SAM management,
For the folks who are watching when this is on the television, what's an IPS?
okay, excuse me, thanks. The IPS is the intertie pipeline system. This is the backbone of SAM's conveyance facilities. From Montara, it brings all the flow wastewater down to the treatment plant in Half Moon Bay, and a series of pump stations connect to it to convey the water by pumping. Now, talking with SAM management and folks on the board, we realized that there's been a lot of deferred maintenance and projects that have been not addressed over the years, and spending limits, we homed in on a spending limit of $2 million a year to try to bring current facilities that are behind up to acceptable levels and reliable levels of use. Now, what you see here are the projects that we identified, and the first 4 bars coming from the left to the right represent the dollar value of projects that we identified in this capital improvement program in the 5-year, 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22. The other projects further out, they're grouped in 4-year increments as they're further in the future. And what you see is the black line is going across the graph. That is $2 million in today's dollars. And with an interest rate of 4%, it increases going to the right into the future. So in 2037, $2 million will be worth just over $4 million. So with that, we compared the projects in today's dollars to this, and applied interest to them. As you can see, there's several years between now and 2022 where we have exceeded the $2 million limit. We are working on changing these if need be, but these projects have been identified as critical to maintaining the mission of SAM. The biggest component of this, as Kishan discussed earlier, is reliability, and that accounts for more than 3/4 of the projects that were identified. And reliability includes removal and replacement and upgrades of existing equipment that most of it has exceeded its useful life. Has done very well for SAM, but the occurrence of failures and braking and machinery not working properly is increasing as time goes on, and these items need to be addressed. Health and environment accounts for just over 10% of the projects that were identified, and these include protecting the environment, protecting from sewer spills and alike, safety, worker safeties, handrails, gratings, monitoring equipment at the plant falls into this category. And as Kishan also talked about, efficiency, improving efficiency at the plant, replacing old equipment with newer, higher premium efficiency motors, pumps, and embarking on projects that would reduce the overall cost of operating the plant and conveying the wastewater. This graph represents the spending by different objectives, and as you can see, a lot of the projects are in the blue category. They're repair and replacement projects, replacing old, worn-out equipment. Most of it was put in well over 30 years ago. It served us well, but failures are becoming more and more common. This is spending over the project's life, over the 20-year CIP, broken down by category. As you can see, we have very expensive category in the force main column. This is primarily due to the almost 4 miles of Montara force main that has not been inspected, does not have any occurrence of failures like we had on the Granada force main, but that is a critical asset to the communities to the north and is recommended that it be inspected since it is exceeding almost 40 years in service and has never been thoroughly inspected. Should the inspection turn out to be miraculous, that it's in good shape, that dollar value of just over $8 million will decrease significantly because hopefully we don't need to replace or repair or do anything exotic to keep that pipeline, which is part of the intertie pipeline system, in function. As you can see, the other projects are decreasing in capital spending value, and these include replacing aging pumps, equipment, administration issues, upgrading buildings, putting on new roofs, and different projects that most agencies are doing on a regular basis. And this is kind of a busy graph, but again, it's a different way of representing the projects that we have identified under this program. As you can see, the force mains and the headworks and the other pumping projects fall into these different categories under different years. So perhaps if you look at 2021, that's when we are predicting that we should go out and take a serious look at the Montara force main and address the other projects. These projects, their rate scores and the estimated value of the capital required to upgrade them or replace them is all included in, I believe, in the board packet that you have. And we can debate those and talk about those if you choose to. That is the end of the presentation, and if I can just show one thing. If, again, these all refer back to an Excel spreadsheet. As if you look at this, again, the large number here is for the force mains in 2019, or these are secondary treatment, and all these projects are identified. We worked with SAM's staff, operators, management, and so forth to pull together the list of projects, identify and prioritize them by their risk consequence analysis, and look at their current dollar value and what it would take to upgrade them or replace them.
And that PowerPoint or spreadsheet is available on the SAM website, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it is available.
So if folks in the audience want to go and look at this, you can go to samcleanswater.org.
Correct.
Well, the other things we could put on our website
We
too.
can do that too.
Yeah.
Let's do this, let's get us, all of us back around and we'll open up for Q&A. Does that sound good? Okay. To the board, do you guys want to keep this screen up? I can do that, I'll just do the meeting from here. What's the pleasure of the group? Do we have enough information that you need it up there? Yes, no? Scott, Catherine, Bill?
If we need to bring it up to answer a question.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to see where I'm going to sit, because I'm right in the middle of that.
Yeah.
Are you guys?
I don't need it, but maybe the audience.
I don't need it.
Well, we absolutely need something that I can do. I'm both doing. Okay, shut it down. Yes, please turn it
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
Just more HDMI.
Just a second. Sorry. Here we go.
I'll go to the eye doctor tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll make room for your laptop.
We'll go to Bill. I'll wait for you. All right, Bill, we'll start with your comments.
Yeah, the sort of the first one is sort of a question that the plant has a much higher capacity than what is being utilized, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the question I have for is sort of like sizing an air conditioner. If you size it too small, then you can't cool the building down. If you size it too big, its cycle's too short and becomes very inefficient and does not take care of the things it's supposed to very well, such as like dehumidification and stuff like that. So the fact that this plant is greatly over capacity, how does that affect the effectiveness and efficiency of the plant?
Well, the plant was designed for, I believe, an average daily flow or peak daily flow of 5 million gallons a day.
Right.
It can handle a throughput of 15 million gallons, I believe.
Okay.
Peak now, peak, for sure. Now, on an average day, right now, due to the drought, increases in efficiency of people conserving water,
Right.
the plant sees roughly 1 million gallons a day dry lift.
So 20% of what?
Correct.
Okay.
But the size of the plant is critical during wet weather events. During the storm period this last year and the year before, we had several exceedances, over 11 million gallons coming through the plant during rain events. So the capacity is there because not only is there a lot of infiltration and inflow into the system during storm events from the three collected agencies, but it's critical that that capacity remains available so that we don't violate permit.
Okay, but then how does that affect the day-to-day efficiency of the plant? In other words, that it's so over capacity is basically because everything is so throttled down, it's only working at 20%. Is the plant actually working properly?
Plant is working properly. We're meeting the discharge permit requirements of not to exceed 30 milligrams per liter BOD or 30 milligrams per liter suspended solids. We're well below those. We're meeting that permit. Equipment is running at normal efficiencies. Dissolved oxygen in the secondary aeration tanks are running fine. We're not over aerating or over pumping.
Yeah.
Plus, we have dual equipments, like we have 2 digesters. So at this point of time, only 1 digester will be running. We have dual clarifiers. At one point of time, only 1 will be running.
Right.
So when the capacity goes up to say 4 MGD or 5 MGD, then we would definitely need to have utilize both of it. So that way we alternate between the 2 equipments.
Okay, and Tim, I think you said that most of the equipment is 30 years old or older and has had a lot of deferred maintenance on it.
Yes.
So that one way of looking at it is this so-called capital improvement program is actually a maintenance program because it's not really improving the systems, it's basically bringing it back to the maintenance level it's supposed to be at in the first place. So, so the question that I really have, that really gets to the bottom of it is that why don't we just replace everything at once because it's all shot?
That would be very expensive. It was, again, as you can see, we've identified approximately $40 million worth of work that needs to be done. And very tough for the member agencies without improving or increasing the rates to, address all these programs. And a lot of the projects are related to each other, and electrical system upgrades and so forth, and pumps. It's logistically possible, but financially, I think it would be a burden.
Without financing, because we're not talking about any financing here, right?
Or grants.
Yeah.
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 We haven't gone into that right now. This is just a plan. So once it's done, then for every year, we will see how much we need to do that. And as Tim mentioned during his presentation also, this is a plan. So every year we're going to review the plan, and then maybe some risk categories will go up, but some will come down. and then our priorities would change. So this is just a plan for the entire 20 year, but at the beginning of the year, then we will see what grants are available for that particular year, see whether those would qualify. Because right now, we have not thought of any grants which would encompass the entire thing.
But we're constantly looking for them. Yeah, as a matter of fact, the Force Main project was a large project that we're just finishing up now. And, you know, we worked to get money outside for that, but through FEMA and other possibilities, but it just didn't qualify. But others might, efficiency programs might, and there's a lot of PG&E grants out there, you know, if you can improve efficiencies.
But at the end of the day, under this strategy, are we ending up spending a lot of money, and at the end of the day, we really don't have much to show for it, because the fact that the equipment really does need to be replaced right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that. I think that the projects that we have identified are spaced over time, depending upon whether, how old they are, and what's the consequences if they fail, and do we have a backup to them. And so systematically, we'd like to go through and not burden the entire agency with a great financial cost, and replace selectively and prioritize, get the most dangerous and most critical assets fixed first, and then others can be addressed as we go. As far as
Maybe another way to ask the question is, are you confident that you've identified the risk in such a way that you have reasonable confidence that you won't have an unforeseen failure based on how you prioritize these projects?
Anything could happen, but we are confident that we went and had several workshops with Sam and the operators and the guys on the ground, the guys who were actually running the equipment, talked to them, prioritized, showed them how this worked, and, you know, listened and heard where all the problems are, and that's how that list was developed. And we have identified over 1,200 assets across Sam's ownership, everything from electrical components all the way down to trucks and computers. So it was a thorough, exhaustive look at everything they own, and, you know, what the consequence or probability of these items failing. And again, anything could happen. We could have a pump fail tomorrow that, for an unforeseen reason. We had an electrical problem with the duct bank, the bus duct corrosion earlier this year, which was a calamity that was unforeseen. And we hope to avoid those by having a systematic approach in place to replace assets before they become problems.
And you feel this plan addresses those issues I understand you can't predict all failures, but like the electrical failure we had this past few months, have you addressed those in such a way you feel confident that the risk of those are at least minimized?
We're confident. It was an exhaustive couple of days of workshops with the guys, and we're confident that we'll capture them.
That's precisely the reason why we've evaluated each project and given 3 different criteria. Otherwise, one could have gone by just the age of the infrastructure and said that these have already gone past the useful life, so that needs to be replaced first. But we did not do that. We went by the various criteria, how it would have an effect on the treatment plant, like what I showed in my presentation. So based on that, we determined the priorities for replacement in each year.
And this is a methodology that's used by agencies across the country. It's recognized by the EPA. And again, it's, in some cases, we came up with 2 projects that had the exact score, exact same score. And so at that point, we had to take a subjective look at them and say, okay, which one should we bump up 1 point or bump down? And again, it's, we could get into the deep numbers, but they're available to look at.
It's the same methodology also used by AWWA standard, I don't have the reference number, but we have a copy of it at SAM, and that determines the same methodology to be used, but that's for disasters like terrorism, tsunami and stuff
Let me get Hammond into
To the comment you just made there, Keishan, about, tsunami, is there any information available currently from sea level rise analysis that would put any of the current infrastructure significantly at risk within that 20-year period? Or is that something that, so items would have to be scaled up in some way to harden them in place? Or is that something that may be outside of the 20-year, depending on the plan?
That's also being addressed in the 20-year plan, where we have identified the mechanical building one, which also houses the electrical, and we are exploring possibilities of seeing how we can either move it or raise it. So that's there in the 20 years capital improvement.
Another risk is Princeton Pump Station, very low, right across the street from the water. We're looking at means of hardening that structure well. It needs, it's on the CIP to get replaced, but obviously the design of the new facility would include provisions for flooding that the original design did not include.
Okay, before I give it to you, you have any more questions? Does that answer your question?
Let me just check here real quick. Okay, yeah, just the other thing that you mentioned about was the Montara force main. Specifically, what section are we talking about, Tim?
Well, we've replaced from the pump station
Yeah.
down to the end of Valley-Mar, as you know,
Yeah.
just a couple of years ago, and so that was good for another 100 years.
Okay,
From that point, all the way down to about Sam's Chowder House,
yeah,
that is pressure force main, and that's about 16,000 feet of pipe. And the Princeton pump station ties in,
Right.
near that's where the sign says for Princeton.
yeah,
At the Chowder House, the flow turns to gravity and flows down into the Portola pump station.
okay,
So that gravity section, we took a look at it a couple of years ago, that's in good shape. We did 2 spot repairs on it, that's solid. We've replaced now, everything on the southern end from Portola out. But the 16,000 feet of pipe between Valley-Mar and Sam's Chowder House has never been thoroughly inspected. The air release valves and vacuum brake valves on that pipeline section have all been replaced a couple of years ago when we did Valley-Mar. So all the assets that are connected to it are upgraded, but the pipeline itself, we don't know, we can't give it a solid, good bill of health. There's no history of breaks on there, but most of the breaks were over here,
yeah,
near Valley-Mar Street. But again, it's an asset that's over 40 years old and needs thorough inspection. In the CIP, we included $100,000 to do a thorough inspection, dig down, do some soil sampling, look at the condition of the exterior of the pipe, maybe take coupons out, send them to a metallurgist, have them look at it. And there's other methods that we can do, destructive and non-destructive assessment of the pipeline.
well, okay. Now, that section you say is about 40 years old, how did that compare to the section between here and Valley pump station?
Same age.
So it could be in the same condition as this?
Yes, but as you know, Valley-Mar seemed to be springing a leak almost monthly, and so we had to address that first. The rest of the pipe, there's no history or significant history that I know of it breaking, so again,
But given the fact that the two are the same type of pipe, the same age, that,
exactly, that makes us nervous.
yeah, okay.
So that's why we'd like to do and get our eyes on it and do a thorough inspection. It could be great, or it could be, as we showed, a $9 million project to systematically replace sections of it. We hope that's not the case.
Right, but we're talking about a 3-mile section.
No, I'm gonna move this on just
Yeah.
so we
Okay.
can, Catherine.
Pippin, thank you for your question about sea level rise. That was what I was going to address. I realize the first 5 years are the highest risk projects of catastrophic or significant failure. Something that I'm wondering about in reference to sea level rise, is perhaps putting several things. Clemens and I watched a water treatment plant presentation from AWA, I believe it was, and it was about the new concept of distributed recycled water treatment. But I've also seen the concept of distributed wastewater treatment instead of having everything go to one major plant. And I'm wondering if perhaps Sam shouldn't be looking at moving the sand plant up someplace in Montara where it's a higher elevation, so that we just pump stuff, turn the pumps around and pump it uphill. A little more power, but, see what could be done there. Half Moon Bay might need some holding tanks, but that's true anyway. Or perhaps some distributed treatment plants along the intertie pipeline system, the IPS, so that we can perhaps not have so much demand on the main sand plant and find other ways to deal with this. Because $40 million over 20 years is a lot of money, and I'd like to see us putting our thinking. I mean, I'm looking at 4 incredible engineers sitting in this room. I'm awestruck, frankly. And just, put you guys together and say, all right, what can we do when we take care of the most pressing and dangerous problems, but what can we do to take us into the next century, or the next half of this century anyway, that's environmentally safe and operationally efficient and meets the needs of our community. And I would note for the public, as Tim said, our peak daily flow design was for 5 million gallons, and we're at 1 million gallons per day now. That's because of the huge reduction in domestic water use by the businesses and the residences here with all our water flow saving devices and practices. So we can think about this, and we can make a difference, and I'd like to see, as part of this planning, some what ifs.
Yes, Catherine, in the program, we have identified several studies looking at beneficial reuse of the digester gas at the plant, which is now not efficiently being used. Perhaps, a different discharge or new use for the sludge, or ways of conserving water at the plant and so forth. So, and in that, we also looked at, okay, there should be a study, or someone should take at least a conceptual level look at distributed systems. Do they make sense? What would be the cost? What would be the impact? What would be the benefits? And how does this tie into all the major things we're also thinking about with sea level rise, costs going forward, development, regulatory changes. There's a lot of regulatory changes that are on the horizon that might really impact us, particularly with regard to the ocean discharge that might be coming under fire in the next 5 to 6 years. So there's a lot of moving parts, and that's why we think that the document should be looked at each year. Projects that are done, checked off, other projects, brought forward, studies to evaluate the efficiency of what you're suggesting is really important.
Okay. And one other question before I see Clemens' hand is up, but the $8 million for the Montara force main, if it hasn't been leaking, if we haven't had problems with it, and obviously an inspection is called for, it makes sense, but are there ways, I guess it depends on what problems you find, if any, to defer that overall huge cost? So that maybe you can, I don't know, run a slurry down that seals everything up for a little while, like fiberglass.
I assume that would be contingent on inspection, I guess.
Yeah,
Exactly. And, yeah, and if we can invent that slurry, I'd love to invest with you.
Okay.
We'd make a lot of money.
Clemens?
Yeah, I'm gonna have one comment and 3 questions. First question, there's 2 spikes, year 2 and year 5 are elevated. There was a question coming up about financing. Well, SAM can't finance. If financing happens, it happens through the member agencies. But ultimately, we have to pay for this. So can this be smoothed out so that this is more friendly to the agencies that ultimately have to finance what you're suggesting here? Question 1. Comment is, you mentioned that during heavy rain events, there is I&I that raises, the usual 1 MGD that the plant sees to significantly higher levels. Well, that is not something that you need a treatment plant for. You can address that through wet weather holding facilities, like we've implemented those already up here north. Then, question number 2. So a 20-year CIP is somewhat of an awkward look, really. I'm very much used to seeing 5-year CIPs, 7 or 10-year CIPs. But 20-year CIP is really a far out look. So where does this idea come from? And with that, now if we're already looking at a 20-year outlook, this agency went together with the 2 other member agencies 2 times through a very heavy lifting phase when it comes to the centralized treatment plant in Half Moon Bay. The first one was formation of SAM, which didn't go well for this agency. It was a financial disaster. The second was the rehabilitation of the treatment plant in the 90s, which also was a financial disaster. The plant was overbuilt, and it is currently overbuilt and wrongly designed. And with that, I'm leading to the similar question as we've heard from Bill and Catherine. Really, when we look at this 20-year plan, I think we have to really then understand, when we're at the end of the 20 years, how comfortable are we going to be with what we did during those 20 years? Meaning, in 20 years, we will have to look at sea level rise. It's cliff erosion that's going to be the impact of the SAM plant. It's not going to be, the elevation, but it's going to be cliff erosion. We know recycled water will be implemented. Right now, there are space concerns. There's repurposing of certain portions of the plant suggested. Everything I look at, new belt filter press, is, well, I don't want to call them Band-Aid solutions, but they are, repairs of what is here.
I'm going to get you nailed on. So the question really is what?
So the question is, have we thought through what is happening after the 20 years, after this long outlook, and similar to what Bill is saying, why don't we spend $40 million right now in bonds, maybe more, and rebuild really what the coast side needs? That's the question.
Okay, if I may answer your first question on the wet weather storage, we've already taken action. If you're aware, we are expanding the wet weather expansion at Portola. It's in the design stage, and we're going to add another 200,000 gallons to the existing what we've already got.
Right, which is addressing 50% of the total flow to the plant. The other 50% are completely unaddressed.
Yes. So those would probably, the way each member agency is already taking action on the I&I, they presume that's going to come down. We've seen that each one of the agencies are addressing on the I&I. Because I&I plays a major role, we've seen, when there is a storm. It shoots up primarily because of I&I. If you go through all our monthly flow reports, that's clearly addressed. So I presume that in the next few years, each agency is able to invest more and then take care of it. That will drastically bring it down. So the peak flow will definitely not touch 11 or 12 MGD. And your second question, where you said, where did this 20-year CIP come from? It was a request from Sandboard to develop a 20-year CIP, keeping the 5-year CIP as the basis. Because the 20-year CIP can always be broken down into 4 5-year CIPs. And you can look at it that way, because we're not saying that once you prepare a 20-year CIP, then we forget about it and we review it at the end of 20-year CIP. Every year, it's going to be reviewed, the 20-year CIP. This is just the beginning. Every year, it's going to be addressed, and it's going to be reviewed and brought forth to the member agencies as that year's budget, taken from the 20-year CIP. Maybe we would move some would come earlier, or some would get pushed, depending upon how they're fed. If I missed anything.
Yeah, and in other agencies, comments are, most agencies will do a 5 or 10-year CIP, as you said. And as Sam Board requested, they wanted a longer range plan to try to forecast and try to be prepared for financial burdens that might be down the road. And when we get to the end of the 20-year CIP, projects that we're doing right now, or a pump or an asset that we invest in right now, will be coming up on 20 years old or more. And at that point, that item would need to be addressed again, just as we're now addressing in 2018 assets that were put into service in the 90s. So again, it's almost like a leapfrog, moving down and looking at all the priorities and all the assets and trying to keep them working, functional, reliable, so that we can meet our treatment goals and the mission of the district.
If I could, I was one of the ones asking for what we're now looking at. For quite some time, I've been urging that we look at all of the capital equipment that we have, all the infrastructure that we have, figure out how good or how long it should be good for, and when it's going to run out, and when we need to spend to replace all the different things that wear out, so that we can know what our default spending plan is if we simply take things to their end of life and then have to replace them. So the 20-year horizon gives us kind of, in my view, the default spending plan. The 5-year plan is especially prioritized towards, we better do this stuff or we're going to be looking at more of what we had last year. So there's the very near term, that's the 5-year plan, and it's heftier than we want, but I want to remind that due to one of the member agencies not being, for various reasons, not being willing to invest, we've had a lot of deferred maintenance that has finally caught up to us. And so the heavy spending that needs to be done in the coming 5 years makes sense. We would have been spending that money anyway in the past. Might have been able to spend a little less because we would have been doing timely maintenance. Now we're playing some catch up. So when we see how heavy the next 5 years is, it's like, well, we know how we got here, and we're in a partnership, and you got to bring all 3 partners along, or you don't get to do the necessary spending. So that's where we are. We've got this very good, fact-based, risk-assessed plan for the near-term spending, and then we know when things are going to wear out, and if all we do is replace it, now we know what it's going to cost. And that opens up the conversation that the 3 of you have already alluded to. Now that we know how much we're likely to have to spend, is there a different way to spend it? Is there a smarter way to apply those same resources? Do we have options? If we're going to spend 40 do we do it this way or do we do it that way? Do we keep investing in that plant, or do we go to a distributed model? Whatever, we got the option, and I'm with Catherine, I'm very supportive of, let's get some good minds together and start thinking about what options do we have. And now we know the size of that budget, because we're gonna spend it one way, so now we can consider, can we find anything else that competes and give us a better use of money, and maybe even less money? So it's big numbers, but we're also talking 20 years.
If I could interject real quickly, when we finished in the 90s, late 90s, the sewer plant expansion repair, a minor paragraph in the EIR said that we had to put in another parallel force main. And we had a peer review. And I think you were just a kid, but Newt was our engineer at the time. And what they said was, yeah, you can do it with holding back wet weather flow. So that's all that's what the force main would be primarily used for. And I was new on the board at that time, and I was so impressed by the fact that of taking what one engineering firm had said and rethinking it. And it has served not only this district, but the coast side well, because the cost of a new parallel force main would have been the same as the expansion of the sewer plant cost, which was about $19 million. So it's putting great minds together is always a good use of time and money.
Jim?
I'm sorry. I'd like to offer one quick technical clarification that I think was passed over. It was written between the lines on what was said tonight. If those holding tanks weren't in place, the current peak capacity of SAM plant would have likely been exceeded in the last 2 years from here. More than 15 million gallons because of the dynamics of the way the system works. I just want to point that out.
Okay, Jim?
I just, Bill and Pippin asked my questions, but I just wanted to follow through with one corollary, and that is, when the pressure relief valves were replaced or checked, wasn't that a time, weren't you able to look at the pipe in those sections at that point?
No, on the Montara pipeline, no. We simply went out and took out the corroded equipment that were in manholes beside the force main.
Oh.
And we inspected the pipe to the manhole, that was okay, but unlike when, on the Granada force main, when we put in those bypass stations, we had a chance to cut out a 20-foot section of the pipe and send a camera down both ends, and that's when we really got a good look at how badly that pipeline, south of Patola Pump Station, was faring. It was in terrible condition, and we finally, that's in our rearview mirror now, thanks to the new force main that just went in. But the Montara force main, we have not inside, we have no bypass stations in that pipeline.
And haven't there, go ahead, Pippin. Haven't there been, there have been no leaks in the Montara pipe? You say?
Between Highway 1 and Valley intersection down to Sam, not that I'm aware of.
I'm wondering why it is called the Montara pipeline, if it is serving restaurants and hotels in Half Moon Bay and most of Princeton, as well as Montara and Moss Beach.
Well, we refer to it as the Montara force main simply because it starts at the Montara pump station.
Maybe we should rename it for clarity.
Okay. Well,
We took pains with the first wet weather holding tank,
Yes.
which is located on our property. We took pains to name that in a way that identifies it as a SAM, piece of the SAM infrastructure, because it is. And and Sam paid for the construction on that. And it's real important in these tense times where one agency in particular is doing a lot of finger pointing, that we speak to the collective work that the three agencies do together as the sewer authority. And so anything that we can do to refer to the infrastructure as the SAM infrastructure, just remember, if the plant were up here, like Catherine suggested, it's an artifact of history that the plant, it collects all the wastewater down in Half Moon Bay. Had it been the other way around, arguments could be reversed, and we could be saying, we don't need that force main. We don't need to pay for it. But it doesn't make any sense. We're three agencies working together to collect and treat and responsibly discharge the water that comes to all three agencies. It has to go, I mean, under the current kind of way that we do this, it goes to one place. It has to be somewhere. Somebody's gonna be closer to it. But if we're partners and working together, that's a fact that shouldn't have anything to do with how we pay for it, because we're in it together. So that's why we're careful with how we refer to things.
Okay, all right, so my question is, I'm used to 5-year plans or 10-year plans that you're liable of how you're going to go forward, even with the 1-year review. So I guess my question is, with the idea of looking at different models of how to proceed with this $40 million budget, where is that going to be addressed in your all planning over the next X number of years when you have this plan identifying the specific projects? So I've heard that these are all great ideas and that we should consider, but I didn't see in the plans that were presented tonight as to when and how that would happen. Is there a timeline for that process, or did I just miss it in the presentation?
Well, the five-year CIP, I believe, Pippin, you just holding one, it's in the board. Oh, in the 5-year CIP, we have listed out the projects, we break them out individually.
No, I understand what the projects you broke them, I get that part. The question is if we're going to be looking at the longer issues related to everything that's been brought up tonight, because you've indicated that certain of these projects going down the line are subject to whatever you evaluate, from a variety of issues of climate change, water rising, et cetera, et cetera. So let's say, where is the planning that would go into saying that maybe that plant shouldn't be there, we should be looking at different models versus continuing on the projects you've identified? Where is that in this overall process?
Well, we've identified, studies, suggested studies, as Catherine.
So those suggested studies are when? That's my question.
Yeah, that's in different, we've identified it year by wise, project wise.
Just clearly on, just give me just tell me.
First study.
I'm asking when the studies are going to be done, I guess, in so many words.
I saw some of them as I was looking.
Well, I know it ultimately depends on the board, but these guys may have it in their assumptions, and I'm just curious where they might be. And I know ultimately they just have to prove it with us.
For example, disinfection, we've started in 2019.
Please.
I'm not suggesting they cost each other.
So, while you guys are looking, maybe I can ask actually a question about that 5-year CIP, because we have this 20-year capital plan, and we have also now this 5-year plan, and this 5-year plan is also a very unusual way of working with the 5-year plan. A usual 5-year capital improvement plan is 1 year. Year 1 is what we're going to do next year. Year 2, 3, 4, and 5 are what we really have to consider in the following years. And every year we implement the projects in year 1 and then reassess the entire plan, meaning we look at a new year 1, add a new 5th year at the end.
Exactly.
And this is not how the SAM 5-year plan works. It was assessed once, we worked off year 1, and now we're at year 2. Why are we not reassessing and adding new years at the end?
That's exactly how this living document should be worked on with the member agencies. We have got quite a bit of work done this year, particularly with the force main. And now as we get into budget cycle and looking at next year, we
Well,
should definitely be
But the
visiting.
the budget is out, and that hasn't happened. It's now year two. I don't see a new reassessment. I see year two plugged in.
This is brand new. This just came out and the 5-year plan was.
Yeah, but the projects which are proposed in 2018 are actually in the budget, and that's also in the 20-year CIP, starting 2018.
Yes, yes, because they are in the 5-year CIP. You started your 20-year CIP with those. But what I'm saying is, why are we not looking at a 5-year CIP that is reassessing every year what the priorities are? And look at the CIP new. Why was the CIP adopted in this fashion that it's worked off for the first at least 2 years? I understand there is now a different way of looking at this, but why is this not reassessed every year?
That's what we're proposing. That's what we're proposing, that the 20-year CIP is going to be reassessed every year.
Correct. But the 20-year CIP wasn't considered in this budget that is supposed to be adopted by the member agencies now, because this budget is already out and approved by SAM board. So the SAM board had no chance of including this 20-year CIP in it. So it's based on the 5-year CIP, which was adopted 2 years ago.
Yeah, but it's the same modality which has been followed, so the projects which were coming in 2018 in the 5-year CIP have come again in the 20-year CIP. And it so happened that this document was completed only halfway when the budget was ready. So moving forward in 2019, we already have that.
That's why
So
I'm
we already-
asking, yes, that's why I'm asking about the 5-year CIP, not the 20-year CIP, because only the 5-year CIP was available for the preparation of this year's budget. Yet it was not reassessed, and that is my question. Why was that CIP not reassessed and reprioritized for this, for the budget that we're supposed to approve now?
You know, I'm gonna put a timeout on this discussion. I think this should be an offline discussion, and perhaps we can get you guys to work it. I wanna bring this discussion, I hear what you're saying, Clemens. I think the question is, are you starting the CIP 2 years ago now in your second or third year? I think that's what I'm hearing, and somehow
Yes.
how did it get wrapped into the budget? I don't know how we're gonna solve that tonight, but I think those are questions that need to be addressed going forward. I know you must have a response.
No, I just have a response to your question where you indicated about the study projects.
Yes.
To give you an example, we have selected a project which is condition assessment of the force main which originates from Montara. We have indicated $100,000 to be spent in 2020. Similarly, we have other study projects like perform disinfection alternative analysis, about 50,000 in 2021. So that way we have categorized certain study projects all along in the 20-year. Once we do the study, then we bring it back again for construction or for whatever it is after 1 or 2 years after the study.
Okay. All right, so is this something we have to vote for, Clemens?
No, this is just a presentation.
What's possible action you
You know, I left it just in case if we want to give direction to our SAM representatives, how to, present the district's position. But we can use this as information item, or we can give direction to our SAM reps.
Okay, Dave's got a question for you too, and that is, could you ask the SAM reps at Half and Bay, if Half and Bay provided the storage, whether would that affect the, I'm having trouble reading your writing. SAM proposed CFPs.
But if they added storage, would the cost of the CIP be affected?
I think that would be.
Did you guys get this? Did you guys get
I
this
think
question?
that's a question for the
Well, let me
engineer.
think
question
about
for you
that for a
guys.
second. So, the question is, if Half Moon Bay added storage, would that affect our CIP, the SAM capital improvement program.
Would that affect the need for some of the facilities, or the upgrade for some of the facilities that are included in CIP?
Most of what we're looking at in the CIP, and I'll turn it to you guys in a second, but most of what we're looking at in CIP is for equipment that has reached end of life, not affecting capacity. We do have concerns that Half Moon Bay is exceeding their flow, the upper bound of the flow that they are entitled to during heavy rain events, and storage would help alleviate that concern. I'm not aware of anything that we're dealing with right now, other than concerns about potentially an excessive rain exceeding the plant capacity. But any storage anywhere in the system is going to do something to help with that concern. So Half Moon Bay right now has no retention capability at all, other than just in the pipes that they have, the same as all the rest of us. There's the retention in Granada, there's the retention here in Montara, but nothing south of the plant. Well, nothing in Half Moon Bay. So
I guess the question in so many words is, if the Half Moon Bay added to the retention capacity, would that reduce any of the maintenance within that 20-year plan that you have in there?
I don't think the maintenance or repair and replacement of antiquated equipment would be impacted.
There's nothing in the storage in your maintenance plan for the storage capacity?
No. But additional storage capacity would certainly help out during storm events and reduce the spike coming down the pipe at the plant.
Right.
No, we get that. The question was, if you had additional storage, would that reduce? Is there anything in there that if you reduce the need for storage capacity at the plant, would that be impacted in the 20-year or 5-year?
I have a question for you, Tim. You talked about the spike that comes during the heavy rainflow, and that spike has a risk factor attached to it for overflowing the capacity of the plant. So if Half Moon Bay had storage, it would be an insurance factor against spikes and reaching the capacity of the plant, right?
Yes. Yes, that is true. And
Go ahead.
Well, I think she said it, to say it another way, they commented some of the equipment is redundant. You could potentially slow down the maintenance maybe a little bit if you had some storage, because you wouldn't have as much wet weather flow. If magically you could keep the plant at under 4 MGD or 3 MGD all the time, maybe you wouldn't use all the pumping that we have.
Right.
Conceptually.
Well,
Conceptually, I think
No,
Dave's
that's certainly
question
true.
is answered.
The amount of pumping
It doesn't
is
seem like
related
there's
to the
anything in
flow.
this research that's
Nobody's
looked at that question. I
Yeah.
think you would have to ask the engineers to reassess, if you reduce the peak wet weather flow, could you change the 20-year plan? I don't think they could. I can't see anything that will answer to that with what's here.
It's an intriguing question.
Yeah, it is.
I think it's worth examining.
Yep. Phil, last question. Do you have anything else you want?
No.
Okay. I'm gonna, unless there's anything else out there, I'm gonna close this off, and I wanna thank you three for, you two particularly for the presentation, and Pippin for your comments. And there's no action we need to take, is that correct? This is just the report?
Yes.
All right, the second item tonight is review and possible action concerning installation of a new nitrate treatment facility for airport well number 3. Comments?
Yeah, thank you, Dwight. Before I hand this to Tanya, who's here tonight to present this item to us, just want to say that this is ultimately an addition of we're suggesting an addition to an additional treatment plant to the system. We currently already have an existent nitrate treatment plant at another airport well, and so we're looking at at yet another water quality improvement project that this district is implementing. And with that, I think SRT did an excellent job in trying to fit everything in existing footprint, because that was really my number one condition. And I know we're still working on actually achieving this ultimately, but I see it is working. And with that, I'm going to ask Tanya to just provide us a little bit the background and what this project is.
Thank you, Thomas. Mr. Chair, members of the board, we are talking about adding a new nitrate treatment facility for the airport well number 3. We have been in negotiations with the Division of Drinking Water for the past 2 years. This well is currently offline. There is a complex transition plan that we have developed for the airport plant wells at the request of the division. However, we're trying to keep all our sources intact, and the threat was that they wanted to put this well into an inactive status, which was not acceptable to the district because of the redundancy issues. And so the point of this, we have tried to fend this off for as long as we could. No water with nitrates is going into the system, of course. However, the situation has come to the point where we have high nitrates in the well. We also have manganese, which the division is strongly advising us to take care of. On the other hand, in the CIP for the water system, we have had money set aside, and this was adopted by this board last year, and I'm sure we're gonna bring it for revision next month. These projects that are before you today are all included in the 5-year CIP. And I'm saying projects, plural, because this is more than one project. One is, although we bundle them together. One is the rehabilitation of the well that should reduce the manganese occurrences. We have had this successful, the district has very successfully done it in other wells. So we're very optimistic that at the low cost of rehabilitating the well, we will take care of that problem without installing additional treatment. The nitrate, though, is something we need to treat. The district has been treating nitrates in the North Airport well since 2004. So this is a very familiar process. And the proposal in front of you tonight is to amend the lease agreement with the Evoqua, which is the vendor who took over we first had an agreement with, a lease agreement with US Filter, with Siemens, who got taken over by US Filter, and now it's Evoqua. It's the same, they're providing the same equipment. It's ion exchange units. And we propose to the same approach of leasing them, not buying them. Which reduces the cost significantly for the district, because otherwise it would have to install sewer and of course purchase the units as well. We think it's a 5 to 10 year transition plan during which the district will continue leasing the equipment. There are some improvements, however, that need to be permanently installed, and that is the plumbing and the controls and instrumentation and electrical. So the proposal before you is to amend the lease agreement is one for the ion exchange units at the airport well number 3, to sole source the electrical and instrumentation work to Calcon, because we do not believe that anybody else can do it at this at their proposed price of $60,000. And also, for the main reason is a compatibility with the existing equipment. This also is included in the CIP in the SCADA upgrade project and in the treatment project. So there are several pots of money that are included in your CIP and in the budget to address these projects. And the third item is, as I mentioned, is redrilling the well, which is going to be bid publicly together with the improvements at the airport site, number 3 site.
So if I understand it correctly, updating the lease,
Amending.
amending the lease, okay. Then there's 100,000 for the plumbing, et cetera, 60,000 for some upgrade work. And then what is the actual drilling gonna cost?
We do have a quote, just a preliminary quote for $11,000, but that's now included in the.
I'm sorry, how much?
11,000.
11,000, okay.
Yeah. So, by the way, there are updated resolutions that in front of you that are in the packet.
Yes, I got it right here.
But those are the three actions really that we're asking for, is the lease amendment, going out to bid for the project, and sole sourcing the electrical work.
Okay,
That is what we're asking for.
okay, board? Any comments, questions?
Isn't this something, in essence, we've actually really sort of weighed in and decided already? That
Pretty
this is
much.
just a follow-up on what we already decided,
I
isn't
think
it?
pretty much just giving the authority to proceed is what this
Yeah.
is about. So I just wanted to make sure there's any questions, any concerns. So if I'm hearing none, what kind of motions do we have to have? I know we have a resolution. Do I have to do anything beyond the?
There are three resolutions, actually, Mr. President. You can take them
I have one resolution in paper.
concurrently or all at once.
They're all one.
Right.
Okay. What I'm going to recommend to the board is that I'd like to pass all three resolutions at the same vote. I don't see any reason why we can't do that. Let me read the three resolutions.
The recommendation is on your
Yeah,
agenda.
he's holding.
I'm holding it. I see two resolutions.
No, this is what we're looking for right here. That's page 2 of this.
Yep, there we go. All right. That's what a broad mind see. Okay, so let me just go ahead and read the three resolutions for the record. So the board will take a vote on the following three resolutions. Resolution number 1 is adopt number, I don't have the number before me, of the Montara Water and Sanitary District approving and authorizing execution of amendment number 3 for airport well number 3 rehabilitation and treatment project, authorizing and directing advertisement for bids, therefore determining exemption of the project under the California Environmental Quality Act and authorizing the district filing for a secret notice of exemption. That's resolution 1. Resolution 2, and we will have the actual number in the minutes. Adopt resolution of the Montara Water and Sanitary District approving contract documents including design plans, specification for Airport Well 3 rehabilitation and treatment project, authorizing and directing advertisement for bids, therefore determining exemption of the project under the California Environmental Quality Act and authorizing and directing the filing notice of exemption. And then resolution number 3, adopt resolution of the Montara Water and Sanitary District approving and authorizing waiver of the competitive bidding for the Adult Well 3 controller upgrade project. Can we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
A second.
I believe it's a roll call.
Director Slater Carter,
Aye.
Director Boyd,
Aye.
Director Wilson,
Aye.
Director Harvey,
Aye.
Director Huber.
Aye.
All right, passes 5-0. Thank you very much for the great presentation. The third new business is review and possible action concerning adoption of a policy requiring personnel services. Clem?
Yeah, thank you, Dwight. This goes back to actually last year's grand jury report about the independent special sewer districts. The grand jury asked questions and really didn't let go of this until they really found out what each agency has in place. And so we really looked at this and saw that we were in need to establish a policy for acquiring personal services. Most construction-related contracts fall under the public bidding requirements. That means everything above $15,000 needs to go out to public bid. Now, for the personal services, in the past, this board approved all contracts that were over $15,000. We already brought those always to the board. So legal counsel now drafted a resolution that establishes the requirement for all personal service contracts exceeding $15,000 to be formally approved by this board. So recommendation is to adopt a resolution approving and adopting policy for acquiring personal services.
Okay. Any comments from the board?
I have a question. I was reading this, and Dave, maybe it's a question for you. I was wondering if there's a difference between personal services and personnel services.
Yeah, quite. Personal means contract services provided by an individual, such as
Okay.
your attorneys and engineers and so forth. Personnel is a specialty of its own, which those services, that's not included here.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a blanket policy for non-bid personal services.
Okay, so for, I don't know, hiring somebody to help us with it, an engineer for sewer service or,
Right.
These are all
Accountants
These are all
or-
1099s.
And you
Okay.
actually do that all the time, quite frankly, but there hasn't been a formal policy on the books. This formalizes the informal policy we followed.
okay.
Yeah.
Can I make a motion?
Sure, go for it.
I
Unless there's
move
any other
that we adopt resolution next in order for the, approving and adopting the policy for acquiring personal services.
We have a
I'll
second.
second.
Thank you. Then I believe this is a roll call again, please.
Okay. Director Slater Carter,
Aye.
Director Boyd, Director Wilson,
Aye.
Director Harvey,
Aye.
Director Huber.
All right.
Thank you. Item 4 is review and possible action concerning cancellation of the next regular scheduled meeting on May 17th, and actually next scheduled meetings on May 17th and June 7th, and consideration of a special meeting on May 31st.
So this is our usual heads up. The way this looks like is, right now, we don't anticipate a May 17 meeting. If we need to hold it, of course, we agendize it and notify everyone, but at this time, it doesn't look like we need to do this. At the June 7 meeting, which would be our next regular scheduled meeting, we have indication that some directors aren't available to be present. And that's why we already discussed at the last meeting to actually hold a special meeting on May 31st. And we actually have our public hearing for the sewer rate increase scheduled for that meeting. So we need to hold this special meeting on May 31st.
Okay. What about the SAM budget? When are we going to discuss that?
Well, on May 31st.
On May 31st, okay. I will probably not be here. I can call in.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks for letting me know.
All right, so there's our meeting schedules. And with that, we're down to our reports, starting with the SAM meetings.
Pulling up my, yeah, so our meeting last week on the 3rd, is that right? That's when we met, the 23rd?
Yes, and we have another one Monday.
All right. We had one just simple thing, we approved a job description for the general manager that went without issue. The thing that occupied all of our time was something that the city brought to Sam. They wanted to discuss problems that they had with Sam about flow meters. Turns out that the flow meters they were concerned about, they were telling us that Sam had failed in its duty to monitor and maintain flow meters. But pretty quickly in the meeting, we came to realize that they were talking about their flow meters that they chose to purchase and install on their own a few years back. Probably to get some idea of whether or not what they were getting billed was fair. Apparently those meters have fallen into disuse and disrepair and have become so forgotten that the city was accusing Sam of forgetting to do what turned out to be half a base job. So it turned out to be a very difficult issue to get through, but I think we left them with a slightly better understanding of maybe a communication breakdown that had happened through some staff turnover. So, just so you know, you probably know, but maybe for the audience, sometime back, we had some flow measurement anomalies that Granada brought to our attention at SAM. We spent quite a long time, many months, maybe a year and a half, trying to figure out what was going on. And it was eventually tracked down to a short in ascending unit on the biggest flow meter that we had there in the plant. And because of the way that calculations are done, that had a pretty big impact. That wound up with Granada paying about $250,000 more than they probably should have. Part of being in a relationship with agencies, they considered long and hard and finally decided that they were just gonna let that water had already flowed under the bridge, and they decided to note it and move on. A few years later, something very similar happened that had a big negative impact to Montara. And having learned from Granada, we all jumped on it quickly and got that sorted out much more quickly than that first time. Now, Half Moon Bay is seeing flows where typically they would run about 52% of the flow, they're up to around 56% of the flow. Now it's their turn to be concerned. Well, we've had prior pattern where we all put our heads together, we figure it out, and then we decide how we're gonna get through it and move on. But in a slightly different approach, they came in making accusations about SAM that turned out to be their own responsibility. So I think we're still concerned about the higher flows that they're seeing. We'd like to get that sorted out. Now that they understand the situation with meters better, perhaps we're going to be able to get together, put our heads together and figure this out.
They want a mid-year budget adjustment if the flows are reduced, which would mean that Montara's contributions to SAM and Granada's would have to fill in what they are asking to be relieved of in the mid-year next year. And given the past history, and I will happily take direction from the board, whether this probably should be part of the 531 SAM agenda item, or SAM budget item. But are we going to, is that going to be part of our approval of the budget, or are we going to suggest that Half Moon Bay follow the same protocol that Montara and Granada have followed in the past?
Is there any technical information available to the member managers that can analyze or understand what these meters are, how they work, what their accuracy ranges are for different flows?
Yeah, we have a
How they're
rather,
installed, a technical cut sheet, some.
we have a rather detailed report from the not too distant past detailing the make and model and characteristics of each of the flow meters.
But that's for the SAM ones, not for the Half Moon
I'm
Bay.
talking about the Half
Oh,
Moon Bay meters.
oh.
Because my questions were
Oh.
specifically regarding this topic that they brought
Oh,
up.
let me say I don't care, and here's
Okay.
why I don't care. Let me just be really blunt about that. I don't care because these meters were never part of the SAM infrastructure, were never part of any of the calculations about flow measurement or billing. It's something that they chose to do on their own, fully for them, that's great. I'm glad they were interested to develop an understanding. Their public works, that's John Dowdy, he's public works, right? Their public works director, in speaking to us that night, made a really interesting comment, that they want to get to the bottom of it and understand it, and it's entirely possible that we've been under-reading Half Moon Bay's contribution, and that they might have to pay more. It's a very interesting comment. I have no information about how these how these meters that seemed so important at the time were left to fall into disrepair. I mean, there was some staff and council continuity across that time period. I don't know, I can only guess, and I'm not going to, but what I know is that they have some equipment and it's of no use because it was not done in concert with the design and construction of the rest of SAM, nor done under the auspices of the board as a whole. SAM's engineers were not involved. So it's a separate, it's almost a science fair project, it's fine, but it has nothing to do with SAM.
If I could follow with one question, appreciate you taking the time to explain this, but to understand, I think, can you just recap quickly how the flow meters are calculated, and did they request a special re-inspection of all the meters, or was that discussed in the meeting?
I think
Apologize,
that-
I didn't watch the meeting.
I think that, at this meeting, did they ask for re-inspection and calibration? No, but the meters that SAM has are inspected from time to time, and by a third party. It comes in and checks them out, calibrates them as needed. One thing that we've learned over the years is that flow metering is hard, and there are many different kinds. And each one, it matters very much whether or not you pick the right kind of meter for the flow you're trying to measure, the location you're trying to measure, that when you install it, that you install it correctly. Like if you take a certain kind of meter and you install it at a bit of an angle, you're gonna get a wrong reading. And there's at least one place where there's a sharp angle in the pipe, and so that one has to be done very carefully, or you're just gonna get something that's not useful. And let me also mention that we don't have meters on all the pipes. Half Moon Bay has many pipes coming into the sand plant. Because of there was an original plant there, and they didn't need to meter what came in because it was just them, right? So they came in all sorts of different directions. When we added the interduct pipeline system to bring the other two agencies' flow in, then it was important that we measure who's contributing how much, because we bill on a fee-for-service kind of basis, just like we do for our homes, right? You use this much, you're gonna pay this much. So that's how we break it down, where we figure out what the flow percentages are, and then we split up flow-related costs by who's using how much. So the calculation is done with meters that measure the flow coming from the north against the total flow coming into the plant. So you subtract the northern flow from the plant flow, that's Half Moon Bay's flow. We've been doing that for 45 years now. Anytime anybody sees the flow numbers going against them, it's time to throw out the whole thing. No, but what it's really time to do is go figure out what the problem is and get it fixed, so we have good data.
All right, well, it sounds like right now, your question for Catherine for the May 31st agenda. I don't think we have any information right now except to see what comes from this discussion. But to your point, if it becomes crazy, then we should have a discussion.
Well,
There's one point that we absolutely have to bring up, and that is that Half Moon Bay made a very strong, unified, two board members and their public works director made a very strong, unified pitch for a flat rate for flow payment.
forever,
Just because it's so contentious. Well, it's only contentious when it's not going your way. And if their flows have gone up, we really need to figure out what that is.
Right.
And in fact, it provides an incentive to figure it out, and we should. And we should all join in and figure this out. Because as we've now seen, everybody gets their turn, and we need that incentive to go in there and
Well,
figure
it
it out.
sounds like this is not the first time this has happened, just the claims are different.
That's right.
So,
It's everybody's sitting in a slightly different seat, and all of a sudden it's like, well, this seat's uncomfortable. We should change everything. It's like,
okay,
no, we should fix it.
just in light of time, anything else? Yeah.
I just wanted to say that this mid-year adjustment for the budget that Half Moon Bay is requesting for the 18-19 budget will have an effect on the budget going from that, in the time forward from that adjustment for Montara. And so I think we need to be clear whether we are going to even consider it or not, because it could could be a rude shock.
So let me ask you this question. We have an existing contract, a JPA, with the two other member agencies. If we're now deviating from this, this should require approval of all member agencies, right?
I would
So-
agree with that, but I believe it's going to be a make or break deal for the budget.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It would be advisable to keep in mind when you think in terms of the flat rate, the legal requirement that the rate must correspond to costs. And
Oh,
by definition, a flat rate may be contrary. I mean, you have very definitely have to have empirical evidence that it reflects the actual costs that you're recovering.
Right, so that might take care of that right there.
And it also doesn't reflect the concept of best practice.
That's right. The state regulators would never show an interest in doing this rate. In fact, the drive is the other way,
That's right.
fee for service,
Correct.
because that's where incentive is
Yeah,
to keep it working.
Yeah.
best.
Yeah.
So I think. the
It's
position-
understandable how they feel, but that's not how we're gonna do this. We're gonna do this on best practices.
Okay, Midcoast,
nothing to report,
CSDA,
nothing to report.
attorney's report.
Nothing to
We'll have plenty later, I'm sure. Director's report, anybody? Flemings?
Yeah, two short things. We currently have some discrepancies with the SAM billing, how SAM uses what we owe them and the other way around. So we currently not able to pay SAM. I'm working with SAM on resolving this issue and looking forward to resolving this very soon. Also, in preparation for the May 31st budget meeting, we've invited Sam to participate in actually finance committee meeting so that we can get a more comfortable recommending the SAM budget May 31st.
So my understanding that will be part of you, Bill, and Catherine getting together on the 14th. Yeah, and I would recommend that if that issue that's involved in the building is not resolved, we should agendize that for the May 31st meeting as well. That's been going on for, I think, what, 2-3 months or so. Okay, I think that's gonna close open session. We are gonna go into closed session, so we'll let the camera do your thing, and then we will convene